Boards, games, boards, games, it's what we're talking about. Boards, games, boards, games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing. And over to this side of me is the person known as Fabricio Leotti. And Fabricio, I believe, comes from Italy and has made a game that focuses on speed. And in Hyperwars, you're passing cards around, but there is lots of life and joy to be found in other parts of life as well. And today we'll be talking about all sorts of things that you might call swell. Life and board games and everything in between. It's what we're talking about. Life and board games and everything in between. I'm getting to know Fabricio Leotti. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. And hello, Fabricio.
Hello, Bez. Good morning. How are you?
I am generally very well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me for an episode of Bezzy Beats and Briefer Blether. Now, normally when I'm on my own on like the Fridays, it's like 5 or 10 minutes. The other days I spend like 30, 40 minutes. But when I'm mid guest, it can be 40, 60 minutes, but it's still a lot briefer than it used to be back in the day. But what I decided, which I quite enjoy, is even though it's briefer, what I've now started doing is having multi-parters. So today we are having you on, and we're going to be talking about who you are, how you got into games, what inspires you, what motivates you to make things, and yeah, we can talk about cats and nationalities and anything else that comes up. But
Awesome.
tomorrow, then, we're going to have you back to talk about real-time games. So how does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great. And thanks for having me. It's been like a long time since I wanted to be in your morning show. It's really cool to be here.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, you never asked.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I'm
so
a bit shy, I guess. I don't know.
please let that be a lesson to anyone. Like, if you're watching and you fancy being on, then please just ask. But as always, let us start off thinking about what we've done yesterday, thinking about what went well, and talking about some of the recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. And hello, Dutch Yoda, lots of love, and I know you can't hear us, but you can see our hands. But yes, Fabricio, what are some of your recent highlights?
Well, so I've been working on some designs. That's been really cool. So I'm designing a solo mode for Hyperwars, the game you were talking about. So it's something that came from some people asking like, okay, so the game plays like from 3 to 5 players or something, and then maybe I should have a solo version, or because it's kind of hard to find 3 people to play these days, all the pandemic stuff and so on. I
A
was like,
solo
yeah,
mode of a speed game. Are you going to keep the speed game element
yes.
again?
I mean, there's no the things are less rushed, but there is definitely a sort of a timing issue with the game for sure. Timing thing with the game.
That's really interesting. I think that will be something that we have to talk about tomorrow, the nature of
Yeah,
having a solo mode in a speed game, because that is incredibly unusual.
yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously, you have had this one game on Kickstarter up, and if people want to check it out, then they can search for Hyperwars, and it's at about 50% funded just now. And it does sound really cool with the passing the cards around. And once you've got into the end, the number of cards that you've got is like your penalty points. That's just such a genius part of design. But going back to what you were talking about, do you have other ideas that you're, even with your Kickstarter going, you can't help but
Mm,
not just solo modes and expansions for this game, but also the next game and the game after that,
yes,
and potentially
definitely
some
yes.
games that might never happen?
No, yeah, definitely for sure. So I'm looking into an idea I had some time ago for a game. If you try to picture one of those, let's say, fulfillment centers, like I don't know, something
Mm-mm.
like Amazon fulfillment center, where you have a lot of robots fulfilling orders and stuff like this. I'm working on a two-player game where
Oh.
each player plays as a central control for those robots, and you need to be more efficient and deliver more orders by automating your fulfillment center. Basically, that's what you need to do. So I've been working on this, and it's really cool. It's really interesting aspect. It has a lot to do like with automation and things. I wanted to have something like a little bit of robo rally, where you can
Mm-mm.
have some things happening regardless of your
So good
plan.
amounts of chaos and a good amount
Yes,
of.
yes, but it's basically like robots. They are like teleporting products from one shelf or one belt to another belt, and you can teleport using your cards, but sometimes teleports will happen ad hoc because of someone else's actions. So you need to try to kind of time this correctly, so you have your products in the correct position. So when they are teleported, they teleport into the right orders and fulfill the orders for you. Because if you don't, your orders are not going to be fulfilled, and you're not going to get any points or stuff like that.
I have to admit, I'm feeling a little bit lost, but it does sound like a cool theme, and I
Cool.
love
Yeah,
to hear about the creativity. I love this outpouring of ideas. Um, if anyone's curious, recent highlights for myself.
I
I
am.
went and visited my good friend Layla yesterday, and yeah, started off with a bit of keyboard playing and playing some Sunday songs. I've decided maybe that will be a regular thing. Like Sunday, if I don't have a guest, I'll sing some songs, play some songs. Because it's like Sunday songs, Saturday songs. I don't know. They both starts with S, but maybe I'll play the keyboards every day. But one of the days, I feel I miss the aspect of performing, of being like, okay, this is a concentrated 20-minute slot of getting up in a whole bunch of people. And if I could say, okay, this day is going to be not just me chatting and improvising, but it's actually going to be like a show, if you know what I mean, then hopefully there would be a few people who would watch it live, and that would be quite fun. Um, I have been thinking about Essen, even though I'm not going there. Vagard is going to be selling my games, a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes noises, as well as the L deck printed as Wibble plus plus from 3J111. I got in touch with Eric Martin. Eric added me to the geek list, which is really cool. And yeah, other than that, yeah, seeing Layla, having a chat, having a really nice cheap kebab for like £1.40. It's the price where I think, how can they even afford to do this? Just the cost of wrapping it up. It was like uh, tiny bits of meat, lots of cucumber, tomato, onion, nice bits of mayonnaise sauce in a wrap, folded nicely. And I just sat there in the, it takeaway place. It's more of a takeaway place, but there are like free tables with chairs on them. And then I sat down, I enjoyed watching the passing traffic for 5 minutes and paying like £1.40 for that experience in London. Wow, it's mind blowing. I would not have expected such a thing. I would have expected it to be like a joke. Do you know what I mean? When you get like £1.40 and it's like, the smallest thing you can imagine. But no, it was like a solid, not like a filling meal, but it was like a meal if you're on a diet,
That's
which
really
I'm
cool.
trying to, yeah, it was a wee bit. But yeah, other than that, had a wander, watched a wee bits of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, communicated with some people. Nice, gentle day. But let me ask you, Fabricio, Some questionably quick questions. This is the next section. It's not an interrogation, but there's lots of questions. Okay, Fabricio, where were you born?
I'm born in Brazil. You almost got it, Bez, but I'm born in Brazil.
Okay, I do apologize. Where are you
No, no
living?
problem. Sorry?
Where do you live?
I live in Stockholm, Sweden.
Okay, and where are you right now in as much detail as you're willing to say?
I am in the living room of my apartment in the eastern part of Stockholm in a municipality called Nacka.
Naka. Lovely.
Nacka.
And who was the last person you talked to?
My wife just now, she just passed by just before this started.
Okay. What was the last game you played?
Oh, I played Root last.
Ooh, which faction?
I played, sorry, I played with the cats in the last one, I guess. Yes, the cats, yes.
Do you have all the expansions? Or any of them?
I have Riverfolk, I have Underground, and I have backed the Marauder Kickstarter, but I don't know if those are all. I think there is one for the mechanical ones, the automata ones. I think so, but I don't have
I
that.
thought that the Automatas came with one of the other expansions. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But it sounds like
the Riverfolk has the mechanical cats, but there is one expansion that has all the base factions in the automata faction. Yeah.
hello, Alex. It is lovely to see
Morning.
you. We are just getting to know Fabricio Leotti today, and we've talked about roots, as you've just heard. We've been talking about Brazil and Stockholm, and if you've got any questionably quick questions, then now is the time. So, speaking of which, what is your opinion of Stockholm, and why did you move there?
I love Stockholm. I think this city is amazing. I really like loving here. I've been here for 6 years now, but even so, when I go out, I still look outside the window like, wow, how beautiful can a city be? It's amazing. It's really beautiful. I love it here.
Are
And I
we
moved
talking
here
the
for work.
architecture? Is there like lots of trees or lots
Yeah, I
of
think the architecture plays a big part on it. I really like this. I mean, I'm from Brazil, from the Americas, so everything like looks newer there. So when you come to Europe, everything looks like, wow, this thing's really cool and old and everything stuff that you saw only in movies when you live in America, right? So that's what happens. And then so I like that, of course, but I think that the thing that is the best for me in Stockholm is exactly the junction between the architecture, all the buildings, and nature. You see
Hmm.
like trees everywhere, and it's so beautiful when you see like one thing that we don't have much, at least in the part of Brazil where I used to live. uh, you don't have much of seasons differences. It's everything is almost the same the whole year. And in here it's very well remarked that you are like in winter and fall and spring and summer. Everything is very marked, so this makes everything so much more interesting. It's like you have four different cities to look at throughout the year, so this is really really cool.
Yeah, I can get that. It's if you're not used to it. I mean, as someone who grew up with a place with four seasons, I'm quite looking forward to going somewhere where it's just hot all year round
Yeah,
and I get to enjoy the warmth. And I just want to acknowledge and give a shout out to London. I don't know if you've ever been here, but walking around the riverfront, you've got St. Paul's, you've got the Shard, and so you've got this juxtaposition of the modern clashing with the old.
I definitely love London. I've been there sometimes, and I think it's the only, yeah, probably the only place I would switch Stockholm for, probably.
Wow. Alex says, my questionably quick question is, what is your favorite unusual flavor combination?
Okay, all right. So I guess I might be surprising you all with this answer, but in Brazil, we don't eat avocados with salt. We eat it with sugar. So it's something like a dessert.
I mean, I've never heard of either. I mean, honestly, the first bit's avocados with salt. That's already blowing my mind.
Yeah, but I mean, if you eat it on a sandwich, for example, it's salty, right? Because you could have like avocados in a sandwich with, I don't know, chicken or meat or something, which is kind of common here in Stockholm. You can find those in several places. But in Brazil, we only eat avocados with sugar. It's like a dessert. You just smash it, make a little like smash the avocados and you put sugar and then you eat it. That's or you make like
Literally
a
just avocado and sugar, nothing else.
yeah, exactly. Or you make some sort of a smoothie with it. You just blend it with sugar. You can put some, I don't know, honey if you want or something, and then you just drink
Yeah, I
it.
was thinking like I would lean more into the desserts parts, and like I like the idea of honey because that's arguably a little bit better for you than sugar. But maybe avocado and honey, and maybe a
Yeah,
bit of cream or yogurt, like maybe Greek yogurt and honey and
yeah, yeah.
avocado. I think that could work.
Could
Mm,
definitely work. And so I grew up my entire life eating avocados, like sweet
wow.
avocados. And then one day I went to Mexico and people were like, no, I ordered a sandwich actually, and it had avocado on it. And I was like, something's wrong here. Someone put avocado on my sandwich. That must be a mistake.
So is
So
it unique to just Brazil, or do they do it also in some neighboring countries?
I think that they do that in other countries in the South America, but it's mostly in Brazil.
And Alex says, I guess it is an avocado pear. J Fool's Guard, hello. It's lovely to see you. And J Fool's Guard is going to give that to try out. And as you might have gleaned from my reaction, I am, curious definitely to try it
I
out.
have to
Although,
I have to say something though, because the avocado we have in Brazil is not the same one that I find here in Europe. So in here we
ooh,
have like the smaller ones. They are more like oily. So I guess I don't know.
in
I think
Brazil,
these
they're more oily.
no, the ones in here are more oily. The ones there are more watery. So I
Hmm.
guess those are better with sugar because they are more watery. But I never tried the ones I found here with sugar. I should maybe, but I never tried.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's not really an unusual combination. It's like, hey, here's a combination that it's regular in Brazil, and I've not even
Yes,
tried it. So I feel like
yes.
I think you've got to give another answer then.
Okay, so maybe I can try to find another answer. Let me see. Oh, I love maybe not super unusual, but I love a very sour beer, like
Okay.
the one they called lambic. It's almost like you're drinking vinegar sometimes, but it's a beer. The process is the process of making beer, but it's normally it's brewed um, in the open air. Not really open air, but it's not inside a barrel or something like this. It's inside a house or something, but it's on the open, in the open. So you
Mm.
can. That's how it's brewed, and then it gets really, really sour. It's almost like you're drinking vinegar. And now my
Wow.
mouth is watering because I love that that
I mean, I have
that
to admit,
flavor.
my mouth is watering as well because when you talk about that, I'm thinking of kombucha, which my friend Layla
Wow.
makes and gives me as gifts quite often.
Yeah,
I'm
nice.
also thinking of this one beer that I drank last week. I don't know if I showed the pictures. There was one of the four beers that I had on the tasting tray that wasn't good. It was so lemony and it tasted almost like I imagine, but it was like that sort of fake lemon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
was like I was soap. I don't know what. Yeah, it kind of tasted faintly like soap when you get a bits of soap in your mouth. For some reason, it was almost like
I see.
that.
But
It
now that
wasn't
you
good.
said that, I also make kombucha base. So that's another flavor I like very much, for sure.
Okay. And Alex says one of the biggest marketing lies in our supermarkets today is the phrase ripe and ready, presumably
Yeah,
meaning, yes, when you take those avocados away, you do have to spend a bit of time getting them ready because they are just not ready. Unless you
yeah,
buy them from the market outside where they're, once the supermarket's getting rid of them, they sell like eight avocados or six avocado or like even just free avocados for £1. It's so much cheaper than in the supermarket. And then you buy them and then you have to eat them like that day or the next day, but it's so good. And yeah, those ones are ripe and ready. Anyway,
and also for bananas, I guess.
hmm,
Yeah,
I think that most bananas are good to eat straight away.
yeah.
But I feel like avocados and food is clearly a brilliant thing. But talking about brilliant things, could you talk about another brilliant thing? Brilliant thing? What's the little thing which is brilliant?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the brilliant thing that I went through when I moved to Stockholm. I had to bring my 6 cats with me from Brazil. And the brilliant thing for me is there are companies to do that for you. This is amazing. It would be such a mess to bring six cats. I guess that if you're bringing like one or maybe two cats, it's kind of fine. Maybe three even. It's kind of fine that you bring it yourself. But six cats is like a military operation. It's like invading a country or something like this because it's really, really hard to do all the paperwork and then transport them and make sure that everything is fine. So we never had to do this, and I think this was brilliant. The idea that someone can take care of your pets and take them from like Brazil and travel as far as Stockholm and then deliver them to you at your place safe and sound. This is amazing. It was really cool. You are on mute, Bess, I guess.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No,
So the
fine.
fact that cat delivery essentially easy like companies for transporting cats exist, that people are doing such niche things, that is itself absolutely brilliant. Speaking of
Yes.
cats, we have another questionably quick question from Dina Ramsey, who asks, are you considering getting an orange tabby? Or why don't you have one currently? It feels like the collection is missing one final member for a full set, says Dina.
I totally agree. It's kind of missing this, and we've been on the lookout for one for many years while we were living in Brazil. But nowadays, I would say no. Six cats is already too much. A seventh one wouldn't be that good, I guess.
That is fair, that is reasonable. Okay, final round of quick questions. I'm going to ask, cards or cubes?
Oh, cubes.
Do you prefer playing new game or game you love?
Ah, that's very hard, but probably game I love.
Okay, playtesting or published?
Ooh, playtesting, I would say. Yeah,
Mm. Miniatures or meeples?
meeples, 100% meeples.
Okay. Well, I hope that everyone feels like we've gotten to know a wee bit more about Fabricio, but let's move all the way back into the past and ask, what were what was the first ever memory that you are willing to share?
I think one of my it was probably one of my first memories anyway, and it is back in 1986, so a long time ago. Uh, and I was watching the World Cup, of course. As everyone knows, football or soccer is very popular in Brazil. So today I'm not such a big fan of it, but when I was a kid, I used to love it. And I
What's it
was
actually
watching.
called in Brazil? I mean, in Portuguese, I assume it's got a completely different name.
More or less, it derives from the same word in English. It's called futebol.
Futebol.
Yeah, exactly.
Is foot actually the word for foot?
No, foot is we say pé.
Okay, so you don't actually translate it, you just say the exact same name but
No,
with a Brazilian accent.
no. If I was going to freely translate football to Portuguese, I would say something like pé bola or something like this. But that word doesn't exist here or there. So yeah, but no, we call it football exactly because of the British. You were the British that brought football to Brazil, and that's how we. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
Alex is asking football in Brazil. I think there's some sarcasm going on
yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah, because some people decided to call it for somehow. I don't know exactly why, but soccer. I have no idea what that means. I always called football my
It's
whole life.
literally only the Americans, I think.
Yeah, I agree because yeah, and even that, right? So if you say American football, then that's what we call football from the US. That's what we call American football.
Mm-mm.
And but even calling them Americans, this is a bit on them as well, right? Because they're not the only Americans. Everybody that lives in any of the Americas is American. So I am American.
Mm-mm-mm.
I'm just from the
Like
South
I want to
America.
say, yeah, you're American. Like you, like in the same way that I'm European, even though I'm not part of the European Union anymore, sadly.
Exactly.
But I do very much consider myself a citizen of Europe, of like the Earth, and like, the Milky Way.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, so I guess they started calling
It's
them like
like if we
American
were
football.
so, oh my gosh, we are going to call our next country um, the Milky Way Supreme Leaders. That's like the level of arrogance that there is in the United States of America.
Exactly. And also that sport doesn't use much the foot, which I think is also very weird to say, right? So why are you even calling it football? You don't use your feet in this game. What the
Exactly.
fuck? Okay, you run, of course, but then every sport would need to be called football if you're considering that. So I don't know. That's
They
weird.
kick it up. I mean, if you look at how much it's in contact with their foot as opposed to their hands, it's probably like about 5% or something. Um,
Exactly.
Alex says hand egg for America. I love that. And talking about the America versus USA thing, Chile is to the east of New York, which is really interesting. It's kind of people forget that, yeah, it's kind of extends on both sides. And hello, Dina, it is lovely to see you.
Hey, Gina.
But yes, so football, early memories. What was your earliest
Yes.
memory?
So I was watching the World Cup, of course, and Brazil was in the, I guess it was semifinals, yeah, or maybe quarterfinals. I don't remember exactly, but there was this penalty kick decision because there were no goals during the regular time, and then the Brazilian kicker, his name was Zico, he missed a penalty. Yeah, and then another important at the time player from France, Platini, if I'm not wrong, he scored a penalty, and Brazil was kicked out of the competition. So I guess that's one of my
Ooh.
earliest memories. So yeah,
I mean, oh yes, and you only have to be 1 point behind to lose the entire
yeah, exactly, yeah,
competition.
yeah.
For a
It's like
moment there, I
five
was thinking,
five.
don't you have to be 2 points behind? No, that yeah.
No, it's just one. Yes, five kicks each side, and whoever ends with more goals, even one difference, is the winner. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like the rules for golden goal and all those sorts of things, it's really, um, yeah, you can't keep the game going infinitely long. So at a certain point, if you need to select a winner, it's kind of sad that you're only testing a very small part of the total skills of the football team, and
Yeah.
only like two people become actually important at the end, the goalie and the person kicking. Whereas normally, like, you know, the defenders, like, are at the end are completely useless.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So yeah, I really think football has a very uh, interesting set of rules. To be honest, I think it's really cool. I used to not like the golden goal rule that they introduced at some point. That if someone scores, the game ends immediately during the extra time, and I think that is really like bad game design, to be fairly honest, because you remove the chance for the opponent to try and recover. So if you
But you've
just
already had the 90 minutes for the game to go on. So at
yeah,
that point, don't you what you need the game to come to the end, don't you?
yeah, sure, but the end is gonna be there eventually because of the time, right? If you have a
But
extra time.
it I mean the golden goal only exists if you need to have a winner. And what's the alternative? What would you propose?
No, I like the penalty kicks better. That's my point.
Sorry, I just dropped um my notes. I do apologize.
It's fine.
There we go. Um
So yeah, I guess I just like the penalty kicks better. That's my point. I guess like okay, it stands in time a little bit. I understand, but having like one single goal, which could be completely I don't know, super random anyway. Could be an own goal, for example, and then if that happens, you lose and you don't have time to recover. That's kind of feels like a bad design decision for me. I don't know.
I, for me personally, it's also about the spectator, though, isn't it? And for
Hmm.
me, like you've already had that 90 minutes, and so the drama of a golden goal, when you have a goal in that final time, just stop the game, you win. That to me is far more exciting and far more
Hmm.
pleasing as a story. Oh, we had this battle. Maybe it finished 0-0. Maybe it was 1-1, whatever. And then one person managed to tip the scales with this goal. Yay. And for that final goal, everyone is involved. It's the defenders, it's the attacker, it's the goalie. Everyone is involved.
I see.
Whereas for the penalty kick, I feel like for the penalty shootout, because it's just feels like a completely different game almost. Yes, you're using skills that are there from the main game of football and soccer for any Americans who are joining us, USA folk who are joining us, I should say. Um, and but like when you ignore so much of the tackling that is such a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
part
sure,
of
sure.
football. And so you can't go in and tackle someone. You don't have to worry about passing it around and opening up your area. You don't have to worry about getting into a good space and having to shoot as you're traveling from a tricky spot and getting in there. It feels like a very artificial, very sure, similar skills, but like a set piece. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, sure, completely. But anyway, even if you have the golden goal, it's not gonna run forever, right? There's also a time for the extra time, and then if even during that time no one scores, then you have penalty kicks
Mm-hmm.
in the end, right? So I understand your point. Of course, it makes it more maybe the tension growing when someone is attacking because you know if that team scores, they're gonna win over you or something like this. So I agree. It adds a lot of tension to the to the game at the end, and it should be very. Relieving when your team finally scores and you're like there watching the game. So yeah, I agree. It's a very interesting experience for the watchers for sure.
So clearly, I'm assuming you played quite a bit of football as a child in the playground, or
Yeah, yeah, sure, yes.
do you consider yourself a good player?
No, not at all. No, I actually, no, I, one of the things I say is that after I grew up, after being an adult, uh, you need to like force me to kick a ball. There's no way you can make me kick a ball nowadays. I really don't like it. So no, I have a lot of friends that still play, but I was mainly forced to play it even in school. I was like, yeah, okay, you need to play this. This is like physical education or whatever you need to do is sports class or whatever. But it was just because I was a child and I could not argue against it. But
Wow.
I never really like enjoyed playing it.
I mean, I'm pretty terrible, but if I were to be invited to like five-a-side match in, yeah, I would happily go off for a kick around, and I like the kind of running around and being part of the team. I do like team games because I think there's something really nice about two teams and one person's going against the other person, and then you've got, yes, the sense of competition of, hey, we need to do better than you. We've also got the sense of cooperation of everyone working together, and I pass it to you, okay, I run it over there, you pass it to me, I pass it to someone else, they pass it into the goal, or maybe I'm just not even doing that much because I can't control the ball so well. But once in a while, hey, I managed to tackle someone, yay, or maybe I managed to do a good pass, and hey, I managed to contribute, yay, me. You know what I mean?
No, this is yeah, sure, sure, no. But I love team games as well, for sure. What I don't like much about football is more like the contact part, because I feel that if both sides are not, let's say, committed in the same way, it can get really nasty very quickly. So
Mm. Like if one
that's what I
person
don't like.
wants to do, if one side wants to do some nasty sliding tackles, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Or I don't know, depending on how much each side is really committed to winning, for example. how much they are prepared to like commit to do that. You can, I don't know, people can do weird stuff if they really want to win,
Oh
and
yeah,
if
if
this
it
involves
gets,
physical contact, I don't know, can get really ugly.
I know what you mean about it. Yeah, and I guess that's a nice thing about basketball, that it's a zero contact game,
Yeah,
which I
well,
always,
I'm
well,
not sure if it's zero, but at least it's intended to be zero, right? Because you have
in
like all the
theory it's
faults.
zero
Yeah,
contact,
exactly. Yeah.
whereas in football, if you hit the other person, it's not a question of, oh, you hit the other person, off you go. It's a question of, okay, was that hacking at their leg, or was that trying to kick the ball? And it's like, for you're allowed some physical contacts for sure, and that's obviously they've got all the shin guards and things.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so you just do not play sports, or do you do any other sports?
So I don't do much sports. I mean, yeah, not super. Was never a super fan of doing sports. I like to watch some sports for sure, but like playing them, yeah, it's not really up my alley anyway. I like to ride bike. I like to swim. All these kinds of physical activities. It's awesome, but like playing sports was never my forte.
Hmm. And just a quick hello to Amin, but whilst I do respect other cultures and languages, if you can write in English, because my familiarity with other languages is not enough. So if anyone in the chat is using other languages, then those ones might end up being deleted because we don't know if that's spam or not. Just as a very quick side note. Um, anyway, so let's. Okay, so thank you for that. Amin says, I love you in Arabic. Thank you for that. That feels like a bit sudden, but you know, thank you very much, I guess. And so, Fabricio, let's move it towards board games. What's the first ever board game or collection of board games that you can remember playing as a child?
Yeah, I used to play a lot of course, in Brazil back in like the 80s and 90s. The most common ones were like the Game of Life and Monopoly and War. But I think the one I really loved and since the very beginning was Scotland Yard. I used to love that game. Really, really cool.
Sorry, did you just get muted? So yeah,
Y-
tell us about.
Ah, all right.
Oh no, yeah, tell us about Scotland Yard.
Yes. So it was this game where you had like to find the clues in the board, and you have a lot of places in the board. And if I remember this right, it was a kind of a London map or something like this, and you need to go from one place to another and collect clues. And you had these small cards telling you if you got this answer, then read this next text. And then at the end, you had to answer some questions like, okay, so the murder happened at the, I don't know, library, and then the assassin was Mr. Blah blah, and then something else. So it was basically a game where you had to find clues to answer the final question of the game. It was not always a murder, for example, could be some robbery or some other stuff. But it was always solving a mystery at the end of the game. I used to love that game when I was a kid.
I've played it a couple of times myself, and I must say that I do really love that. One of the original hidden movement games, and still one of the best.
Yeah.
It's amazing how sometimes the designer just nails everything so well on the first attempt. I mean, sure, other people have taken deck builders and made them more interesting and stuff going on, but Dominion still really holds up today, even.
Yes,
And
totally agree. Yeah.
but so you're playing Scotland Yards. I mean, these are really quality games. And at what point did you decide that you want to start working on these games.
Yeah, it was. I think it was back like in 2001 or something. Yeah, I was really wanting to play some board games with my friends, and there were not many back there that I was like willing to play. I could play Monopoly again, or I could play something more interesting like War, but I wasn't really like, okay, I want to play War, but it's not really War that I want. And at the time, I was playing a lot of RTS games like Age of Empires on my computer, and I was like, okay, I'd like to play Age of Empires with my friends, but not over the computer. I would like to play Age of Empires on the table. So I decided, okay, what if I make something that is more or less like War and more or less like Age of Empires, and then I can uh, try to make a game for my friends. And I did it. That's exactly what I did. I spent like maybe 6 months designing the game, trying to figure out how to make things work because I needed like progression for the units. So I needed to invent a progression system. So okay, this starts like a soldier, but comes into cavalry, and then from cavalry goes to something else, and I don't know, something like this. Uh, and I came up with a game that was, looking back today, horrible, but, but it was still very cool. I mean, it was a huge rule book. It was like 52 pages in a rule book. It was really, really big. And yeah,
And yeah, Jay Fool's Guard shows some love for Age of
yeah,
Empires as well,
Age
saying
of Empires is amazing.
Jay played it a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you talk about 54-page rule books, it's interesting because as a child, I remember playing Warhammer. I remember getting into Warhammer. It was ludicrously expensive. I still, yeah, I'm kind of gobsmacked that I was able to get the starter sets. Looking back at like it was, 100 quid, which for sure your parents can afford it, but I was like, oh, like eh, people had been getting into it, and it was like, oh, we can play this, and there's all these armies, and I think they saw, okay, this will be something that lasts a long time, and I did get it, and I remember having this big, thick book full of not only the instructions, but the stories, but even reading the instructions, some of which I would never use, was almost like immersing myself into this world. And at that point, I loved having I don't know what it was at the time, maybe like 100-page rule book. Whereas nowadays, if I sit down and there's a rule sheet which is more than 8 pages long, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to, set aside some time for this. I'm just like, I'm all about the cult of the new and playing new games. And yeah, but it's just wow how tastes, my own tastes have changed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I relate to this when I think about all the tabletop RPGs I have played, and I was normally the game master in all the groups I was in. So I used to read a lot of TTRPG books, like all of them, many supplements. If you think about GURPS, I used to play GURPS when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and it was like, okay, you need to read this
That's
base
generic
rule
universal role playing system,
exactly.
something that's designed to let you play any environment that you want.
Yeah, and exactly because of that, you need to read the basic rules, and then you can invent whatever you want, of course. But if you want to like dig deeper into some specific subjects or universes or something, you need to read the supplements. And
Hmm.
there were hundreds of them, and I read so much of those books, and
And
then
how
I
thick
started.
was each supplement?
So it was much thinner than the base book, but still a lot. I mean, it was going to be maybe 60 pages each, maybe something, maybe more, 80 pages sometimes each supplement. You could get some that were really big because you had a lot of powers. So if you think about GURP Supers, for example, where you make like superheroes. The book was really thick because of how many different powers you could have for your character and stuff like that. So it was really, really. And then when I thought that was enough, I went into the Vampire the Masquerade world. And then, oh my God, this is like literature. classes. Like it doesn't have an end. It's like
But you
endless
loved
reading.
it.
Yeah, of course. I played it for many years. It's amazing.
And I think that's the thing, like these sorts of games, I this might be a bit of a broad sweeping statement, but these kinds of games are for people who like to think more deeply, who like to read. And sometimes, there's a lot of games. I mean, frankly, my own game, Yogi, which is selling well, here's a French edition. The French one is just the closest that I've got. Le jeu tordon depose tordu, Yogi. Anyway, so it's a brain dead game. I'm not going to say like I'm not saying that people who play it are brain dead. I'm not, obviously that would be quite harsh on myself. But what I am saying is that you don't need to involve your brain too much. Yeah, sure, there's a little bit of creativity thinking, okay, I need to touch my ear with a finger. Okay, I'll do like okay, maybe if I've got that, then I'll swap my fingers so that I can do it. Whatever. But it's very minimal. And the rules are you can explain it in 30 seconds. Whereas when you go to something like a historical war game or a role playing game, the expectation is that you come in and you have already done the work ahead of time. I mean, Root is a touch towards that side where, okay, there's not loads to read, but you do have to read a good, 3-4 pages and understand a fair bit before you get to the table. And then if you want to play something like Napoleon's Triumph or whatever, okay, there's a good, as you say, 50 pages to read, and then maybe you get some designer notes and it says, oh, by the way, this is how the history is actually different from this game, which is exactly what people want. It's like that further reading, and sometimes it says, oh, by the way, if you want to know a bit more about the history, here are some good books that I recommend. And in the indie role-playing scene where they say, oh, by the way, this is what's inspired this part, and this inspired this part, and like just a big community, and it's like, oh wow, I get to read this, and sometimes it's not even any game rules, it's just basically like stories about the world and about the characters, and it's just like reading a fantasy novel.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, for one of my Vampire the Masquerade campaigns, I made a list of movies and books that the players needed to read or watch or something to get in the mood to even create their characters, because there's all about it, right? So, and yeah, I think RPGs are very special on this. And even after that, I started playing Call of Cthulhu, which is even more reading, like it's endless readings as well. You can have a lot of interesting things to
very much all
give.
about the investigation, about the sense of dread.
Yes, exactly. So I had this Call of Cthulhu campaign that we played, that the mystery was so intricate that the players made, one of those boards that you have, like investigation boards, and you have like the pictures and you have lines connecting. So the players made one of those, one that they could carry, so they could bring to every session, and they had this board up on the wall every time we were playing. So it's, as you said, it's much deeper. It's something that people like that really want to spend time thinking through stuff want to play. Of course, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Alex did kind of bring up like the Warhammer being much closer in scope to a Dungeons and Dragons style manual of play, and yeah, that sounds lovely. J Fool's Guard says a mock-up of Warhammer using plastic pearls. I've kind of done that with, I think it was like the rules of War Machine, and then I got it at UK Games Expo 2011. I just, you know what, maybe I don't really have to spend 50 quid on the miniatures to just play this game. Let's just play this game using these things. There was actually one miniatures game, I don't know if you played this, that was sold as a deck of cards. The idea is that each card, instead of miniatures, you had cards, and then the cards it was like top-down pictures of armies. Like one card would represent an entire battalion, so it was like 20 armies here, 20 armies here, and different types of armies, and then you're moving them all around the table. So you've got this measurement that you have in miniatures games. Have you seen those sorts of things? Are you into those kinds of measurements and miniatures games?
Yeah, I've seen some of those. I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen one that involves cards and measurement. I don't think I've seen this, but I think it's really interesting take on it because I believe that I like miniatures. I think it's really beautiful to see them and they give a very interesting feeling to the game. But I think sometimes that it is a bit too much. I kind of feel sad for some games that are miniature only. So the game is not really something, and the only thing that is interesting in that game is the miniatures. So I mean, it's fine
Mm.
to collect miniatures. Again, nothing against anything. Anyone that wants to play or buy those games is completely fine. But I like the card take. It's really sounds interesting to have a card to replace a miniature in this
I
case.
mean, it definitely makes it more financially accessible, and it also makes it more environmentally sustainable. Is the thing
Hmm.
that I like about it,
Yeah,
because I think that for me, coming from a place of I want to play all the games in the world, and there was a while when, frankly, yes, I come from I did used to play Magic the Gathering, and then, but I had hardly any cards compared to the people who were, you know, playing all the time and winning all the time. I had spent maybe
yeah,
20, £30, and that was basically it. Kind of like Richard Garfield originally imagined people would. But then, of course, there are the people, and then I was sitting in the shop thinking, oh, I could buy that one for 50 pence, or I could buy that one. And then someone comes in and says, oh, can I have a box of boosters? And I was like, oh my gosh, one day I want to be that person. And then they said, oh, it's actually not that exciting. And then one day I did manage to be so rich that I bought a box of boosters of Pokemon. And then I was like, it's fun, but yeah, it's.
yeah, yeah. I completely see what you're saying
And
there.
also,
Yes.
Pokemon for me was just not as intricate and exciting a game in the first place. But no, I do feel like off side tangents, it's amazing how many um, CCGs Richard Garfield has come out with in the past year. Like there's been like two new ones, like very distinct and dissimilar. Is Keyforge past year? No. I'm sorry, pandemic is screwing with my sense of time. Never
No, no.
mind.
Keyforge is a bit older, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, I blame the
But
pandemic.
anyway, it's an amazing feat anyway. So
Mm-mm-mm. Continuing to make cool designs. Well done. True story, by the way. Last night I had a dream about Mark Rosewater. I was, I was like just chatting to them. Anyway, have you ever dreamed about a board game personality?
no, I don't think so. No, I've dreamed a lot of board games, but not board game personalities. I don't think so.
Like in my dream, do you know Mark Rosewater, head designer of Magic the Gathering?
Yes, yes.
In my dream, they were really nice, and then we shared sweets, and then Mark Rosewater was going to come on to my 500th show. But yeah.
Amazing. It's really
Anyway,
cool.
so let's talk about yeah. Make it. Are you a creative person? Would you say?
Yeah, I like to think so. Yes, I used to write a lot of stories when I was younger. I mean, I had to come up with RPG scenarios like every week or every 2 weeks or so. That's how frequently my group used to play, and I was the only one playing as a game master. So I for example, we played a cyberpunk campaign for 10 years. Hello.
Hello, Joanne. Lovely to see you. We're just getting
Yes.
to know Fabricio Leotti, and
Hello.
we're talking
Welcome.
about game design, and we're going to wrap up in a wee bit. But it's lovely to see you. And if you have any questions, well, I guess you've not seen the previous bit, but if you do have any questions, then if we haven't already answered them, I will ask them.
Yeah. And so I we ran this campaign for 10 years, from 1995 to 2005. Of course, we didn't play the full 10 years. It was more like, okay, we stopped a little bit here, played a little bit of Vampire, then we came back to this campaign again, and so on. And we started playing with GURPS, but eventually we developed our own RPG system and started playing with that for many years yet. And in the end, it was around 250 different scenarios. And I wrote most of them. I would say 240 scenarios. So I wrote each one of them basically. So yeah.
it's interesting because as you facilitate games as a game master, I think there's definitely a parts of games do force you to be more creative. Like there's games about problem solving and um, there's games about doing other things better, whether that's contorting or making clear noises, which has a bit of problem solving, or games about kicking a ball into a net and the competitive spirit. But and some of those games are just about the spectacle, but then there's also games, and some of those games are just about rolling dice and there's zero decisions at all. But then the games where you are making creative choices, whether it's Rory Story Cubes or being a games master in a role-playing game, it feels like those are training isn't seems like you have to go to the next step, which is not what I'm trying to say, but it does feel like it's, yeah, I'm going to go use that word, training for creativity,
Hmm.
learning to be a more creative person, learning to, and that can help you, whether it's in making music or writing or indeed making your own games. So I do sometimes wonder, do people who play games tend towards more creative people? At least those kinds of games.
Yeah, that's a fairly good question. I think it depends on how much invested you are on it. I think, at least for tabletop RPGs, I guess that you could just come to every session and play with your character, and of course, you're gonna have to take some, as you said, creative decisions during the game as the session progresses. I think it's okay, but if you're not that invested, that's gonna be about it, right? So you
Mm-mm.
spend a little bit of your creativity when you are creating your character, when you are playing a little bit, but overall, you don't have to do it. But if you are really invested into doing this, regardless if as a game master or a player, then definitely yes. Because I had some players that really made me super proud, like creating things at first place, kind of okay, just for their own character or development or stuff like this, but that became inside that same universe something huge, something that we talk about to these days. So that's my point. So it started from a player and developed into something super important inside of the game universe. So definitely it is a amazing tool for people to develop and, as you said, train their creativity.
Joanne asks, what game was it that we were talking about that involves a long story? I think it might have been Vampire the Masquerade or Call
Ah,
of
well,
Cthulhu.
you mean the one I guess you mean the one I played for like 10 years. It was actually a cyberpunk campaign that we developed ourselves. It was like a universe we created just to play our own game. So it was not nothing commercial at start. What we had used from the commercial part of it were the systems. So we played using GURPS, then we moved to something called, I guess it was Conspiracy X or something. Then we moved to something else, and then eventually we invented our own game. But it was basically a 10 years campaign developed inside a universe that we created from scratch, and it was in a cyberpunk setting, and it was, I must say, really cool.
And I think this is really interesting because so many role players end up playing a lot of stuff and then eventually making their own set of rules. And it's a set of rules that, as you say, it's never commercially available, but it's the best suit for you and the people around you. Because when you learn enough to design a game, you can make something that's very I which is ideal for that very specific set of circumstances. Like I can design a game as best as I can, but if I want it to be mass produced, I need to design it so that thousands of people will enjoy it. Whereas if you design a game just so that the 5 people that you play with will enjoy it, then you can make something which is that much better for yourselves. And I love the idea of GURPS, generic universal role playing system that Fabricio mentioned, where it is a games. It's the opposite style of game system to what the L deck is. Whereas the L deck, it's one set of components, many rules. GURPS is one set of rules, many applications. So there's two, and in that sense, in GURPS, you are, yeah, let's say you are able to play lots of different things. But what I wanted to remind Joanne and every other listener or viewer of is whatever role playing game you are playing, it is ultimately so much about the players around the table. You can play first edition Dungeons and Dragons, or fifth edition, or Call of Cthulhu, or Vampire, or anything. And I have known people who play any of these things for years and years and years, one long story. And it's all about what people bring together.
Yeah. And you know, I think the same kind of applies to when you are creating scenarios. I really admire people that create published scenarios because they are more generic and still they can be very engaging. Because when you are doing your own campaign, you tend to create stories for your players
Mm,
because
mm,
every
mm.
character's story matters. And then in the end, what you do is that you tailor your story around your characters or the players or something like this. So I guess it's kind of the same for the system. So that's why I think it's very hard to write good generic scenarios where you could engage people just by the mystery they have to solve or the adventure they need to take or something.
Well, before we wrap up, and yes, the cat question was asked, um, and there's a shout out for Fabricio's lovely fluffy blanket behind you. Um, looks more like a cushion, but if you and the question that I want to finish up with was, so tomorrow we are going to talk about real time games, and we're going to focus on what real time games are, um, which, yeah, it's not. It's basically a game where the speed at which you do things matters in some way. So whether it's football or um, yeah, Wibble or Hyperwars or
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to. I can't think of any. You know, normally when I talk, if I were to talk about a turn-based game, I would talk about Trivial Pursuit or Risk or whatever. It's yeah, there's so. And if I were to talk about a war game, there's things that I can think of that people might know, but I cannot think of a real-time game that's mass markets off the top of my head.
Okay. You can talk about Galaxy Trucker, for example,
Yeah, I mean,
or
people who are in the board gaming space will know Galaxy Trucker, but I
yeah.
can't think of one that's mass market.
Um, hmm.
I can't
Mm,
think
mm.
of. I mean, has Galaxy Trucker sold millions? It might have,
Well,
but it's
maybe, but maybe
certainly.
not
I
mass market.
wouldn't
Yeah, you're right.
think it's mass market. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
fairly good
Sets is
question.
actually quite close. Yeah, Sets is probably like sold
Oh,
quite a
yeah.
bit more.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but I can't think of anything where it's like, okay, a dexterity game. It's like Jenga. Everyone knows Jenga. Okay, a cards game. It's like Uno. Everyone knows Uno. Okay, combat, a cooperative game. And this is interesting because again, cooperative games within the hobby, I could say, okay, Pandemic, um, Forbidden Islands, yeah, Lords of the Rings. If I wanted to go old school, but yeah,
Mhm.
even like cooperative games, it's interesting that divide. But yeah, but people all know. But anyway, I want to finish up with a short teaser of tomorrow. If you can tell us a little bit about maybe one design decision that you made, and maybe you can talk about my favorite one from the game of Hyperwars.
You mean the card passing thing, or?
Yeah, I really like that. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, I think that's just a genius idea.
cool. So, yeah, I think this decision to have the card passing thing in Hyperwars, which is basically the core mechanic of the game, um, it was I decided to use it because I wanted somehow instead. Okay, you don't have turns, so it's not a turn-based game, but you still have somehow a way to have a flow of things running. So it's not just okay, whoever can draw faster something makes more fun because this is very local. I still wanted some interactions between the
Mm-mm-mm.
so passing the cards for me it was a great idea because you're not only playing as fast as you can and passing cards, which kind of can make the other person a bit stressed if they're receiving a lot of cards, but you're also kind of giving them the same sequence and therefore strategy that you are following. So ideally someone or theoretically someone could just take your cards and apply them in the same order as you are because you're just passing cards to them, right? So if everyone would do this in the game, so whatever card I receive I play, everybody would be playing more or less the same game, but still the end result would be highly different because the decision you make is not just the card you play but how you play this card, how you execute the action, how you where you play your meeples, where you play your cubes and stuff like this. So for me, that was the general idea. How can I give something to another players? Yeah, exactly, Gina. Yeah, Gina
And
saying that.
Dina says I had a player do that in a session to me. They figured I knew what I was doing. We ended close with 19 and 21 points.
Yes, exactly. So that's something that's really interesting and something that I decided to do also to emulate the scenario we are playing in Hyperwars. So every player is a corporation, and corporations do that. They look at the other corporation, then they kind of copy the way they do this, just changing this and that. But the general, let's say, commercial attitude of every corporation can be copied by some others. So this was more like the idea behind the card passing thing.
And what I love about this is that you want to, when you're using one of these cards, you're going to have to think about what you're doing with the card, right? And it's not like one card says do this. It's like one card says do this to like certain units, but then you have to decide which units you do it with. And there are decisions involved in every card you may play. But then the slower you do those decisions, the more cards you're left with, and every card you're left with is negative points. And
Yes.
yeah, that is fantastic. And Dina says that the game relates to marketing. Luke, identify what the competition is doing and adapt to it.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it. And I just realized Jay Foolsguard mentions Double, and that is a great shout for sure. Double and also Jungle Speed. I can't believe I forgot those two. I mean, those two have definitely sold millions. I mean, Double's like Asmodee's biggest selling thing. Um,
Yeah.
so yep, Double and Jungle Speed are definitely two real time. Um, and honestly, the rank of a game on Board Game Geek, even though Galaxy Trucker is going to be higher in rank compared to either of those two games, it doesn't make it more mass markets at all. If anything, I would suggest the opposite quite often.
Wow.
But
203 in BGG is very good for.
it is very good. It
Wow.
shows that people who are on Board Game Geek and are rating games on Board Game Geek really like that game. But it doesn't mean that it's a mass market game.
For sure. For sure.
I
Yes.
mean, I yeah, like if you look at, I mean, Monopoly, if you went by the ratings, that means that it's a very niche game. Like, it doesn't quite tally, and it the simpler the game, the worse it's going to do on Board Game Geek, which is kind of the opposite of how it's going to sell quite often. But um, yeah, Joanne says I am having trouble understanding the concept of a real-time game. I think the way that I
Yeah.
can put it is in a normal game, you have to do a thing. Maybe like in when you've played some of the games on the stream with the word games that I've been playing, sure, you know, I might be waiting for you to take a turn. But if you need to take another minute to take a turn, you say, sorry about this, can I get another minute? If we are playing a normal strategy game where you make decisions like chess, if you decide, okay, where am I going to move this piece? Maybe you're playing very competitively and you take 5 minutes or even half an hour over every move, or maybe you're playing more casually, and it's like, okay, we want to play quickly, but that speed is dictated by the social conventions and your own desires. It doesn't affect how well you do in the game. Imagine, conversely, a game where it's really simple. Okay, a game like Wibble, just to promote my own game, Wibble. There's two L deck cards in the center. You've got a bunch in front of you. The first person to shout a valid word using at least one letter from each of those cards is gets a bonus card. You get some points. Every card is worth points. It's literally just the first person to do that. Jungle speed. When your pattern matches someone else's pattern, the first person to grab the totem gets rid of some cards. The object of the game is to get rid of cards. And so it's all about the speed. The speed at which you do something contributes to your success.
Yeah.
I think that's the fundamental definition, that the speed at which you do something contributes to your success.
Yeah, I think there is something else as well. That is the simultaneous play. So, of course, when you're playing a game with turns, of course, you are kind of playing the game the whole time because you don't stop playing the game just because it's not your turn. I understand that, but there are no single player turns in a real time game. That's the point. So when a turn happens, everybody is playing in the turn. So that's the thing. So it's simultaneous from the point of view that there are no single player turns. That's it.
I would agree that as far as I can imagine, as far as I can think, every real-time game does have simultaneous turns, but I would say that not every game with simultaneous turns is a real-time game. For example, Race for the Galaxy, everyone chooses a card, everyone puts the card down at the same time. It doesn't mean that, but here you can say, oh, we're still waiting for one person. Okay, once that last person's put their card down, everyone reveals. You do all those actions, but it's not a real-time game. Yeah, and so I think and I'm just thinking that even though every real-time game that I can think of is the faster you do the stuff, the better, there are some games like Kitchen Rush and also Pendulum, where you need to wait for the egg timer to run out. And I'm also wondering whether there are games where it's the specific timing that matters. And I guess you can also touch into stuff like Atmosphere, the very old game with the VHS recording. And even though with the players are taking turns, then the video is adding this measurement of real time, which is an interesting aspect. But fundamentally, we are talking about traditional real-time games, but we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Do you have any before we finish up, if you want to say anything more, Fabricio, please feel free, but I'd always like to ask everyone else, over to you, what are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. So if you're about to do something, fun and frivolous or super serious, something that you want to do, something that you need to do, feel free to let us know if you want. Fabricio, take us away.
Awesome. So yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Bezzy, was really cool being here. Really, really cool. It's amazing. But I mean, what I'm up to now, I'm basically starting to head into more designs. So I have created a company for the Hyperwars Kickstarter that is up now, and I'm not intending to just have one Kickstarter. So definitely, I'm riding this ride of starting a company and start thinking about like product and where this goes. So it's gonna be a great journey for me, a very new one. I never had a company. I never had a company before. I never had to deal with these things. So for me, it's like a kind of a discovery journey as well. So that's what I'm up to now.
That sounds fantastic. And Joanne is needing to go now to see friends. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for being here. Lots of love, Joanne, and have a wonderful day. I am going to be sending a couple of emails. I am going to be, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got planned. I try to take Mondays and Sundays off, but it doesn't really work out like that. I'm, yeah, going to be doing a few emails, just enough work that's like, okay, this is the work that absolutely needs to be done today, and stuff that can't really wait. And if I've got the energy, send out stuff for the L deck. But I'm going to be also watching a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and enjoying that. Um,
Nice.
Dina says, I love it when people stick around in the community. Um, and I'm having a board meeting with We Love Games today, says Dina. That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Um,
Say hello to Natasha for me, Dina. She's great.
I hope you all have a day of wonderful things planned ahead. Feel free to keep those comments coming. We have talked about so much today. We talked about solo modes for Hyperwars. We talked about your constant stream of designs. We talked about moving from Brazil to Stockholm, about having 4 seasons, about the architecture and the parks, about cats, and apparently 6 is enough, about having delivery systems for cats, about having avocados with sugar.
With sugar.
Mm.
Wow.
But apparently, there's a difference between Brazilian avocados and European ones because European ones are more oily. So, but you still might want to try avocado with honey and Greek yogurt. It's an interesting idea. I'm going to try it one day. I will report back to you. We talked about football. We talked about the nature of the penalty shootout versus the golden goal. We talked about, yeah, Brazil being good footballers and getting to the quarters or the semis, but being knocked out by France. We talked about Warhammer and miniatures and RPGs and long rule books for war games. We talked about real-time games, and we had a little touching into what does that mean. And then, for some reason, my mind's completely blanked with one of my favorite games, Jungle Speed, and also Double. And but yeah, those are definitely mass market games. Um, J Guard has to do some emails too, also prepping for Essen. Yes, I'm doing a wee bit of that as well, because even though I'm not there, if you are there, then please feel free to tweet a photo and I will retweet it to see what's happening at FreeJ111 and say, hey, this is Bez's games at Essen, and I would love to see that at different times, because, you know, if Vagar takes photos, which I'm sure they will, it'll only be during the quiet moments when no one's there. Because speaking from experience, if you are running a stand and taking a photo, then the times that you take a photo are when the stand is empty. And yeah, Dina says, I'm so doing that. I might have to make some social media content for Essen. Vegard will take lots of it, he promised me. And it's been lovely. I want to say, yeah, if you want to check me out, then I am basically Stuff by Bez everywhere. And check out the streams. Tomorrow we are going to be back, same time, 80 minutes before whatever time it is right now for you. And we will be talking about real-time games. We'll be comparing things like Camelot and, you know, all the games that we talked about, and Hyperwars and a couple that I made, and like how you can get strategy into a game, and like the nature of this, you know, you do want to have this kind of audit trail, but how much do you trust people to not make mistakes? Because it's not just about cheating, people making mistakes. There are real problems. How can we get around that? We'll have a discussion. Maybe we'll come to some conclusions. I don't know. If you want to check out Fabricio, where do you like to be found?
So I can be found at dicecoalition.games, or basically, if you look for Dice Coalition games like everywhere on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, you should be able to find me, even on TikTok. So yes.
Okay, so you are at Dice Coalition Games literally everywhere.
Yeah, I guess
And
the only one that is a bit different is Twitter. It's a coalition underscore dice. That's the only different one. But yeah, all the others are dice coalition games.
and yes, hello Runa, it is lovely to see you. I hope that you're generally doing well. And yes, we are finishing up. I am not streaming tomorrow evening either. I did stop for a few weeks because of the laptop, but yeah, I'm going to. But lots of love. I hope that you're generally well and have a wonderful day. For now, I just want to say thank you, everyone. You've been wonderful. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Thank you to my lovely moderators, Alex. Thank you to yeah everyone who came along: Yoda, J Guard, Dina, Alex, Joanne, and Runa, and yeah, Sushi. If you're still in the chat, then tomorrow come along and you will have some time for questionably quick questions, or when I'm doing a solo show, if you have questions, absolutely hit me up. And you can also reach out to me on all those places at the bottom. For now, lots of love. There is only one thing left to say. This is already, I'm not sure I can call this conversation brief, but it has been brilliant. And so for now, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, Dina. Bye bye, J Fool's Guards.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Bye bye, everyone. And if you're watching this after the facts, bye bye to you too. And feel free to pop in live, but lots of love. Bye bye. Bye bye, Runa. Bye bye.